Hey, if you're a copyright fan, then one of the biggest cases just came down from the Supreme Court. It's the Andy Warhol Foundation versus Lynn Goldsmith, and it revolves around prints and this illustration, this silkscreen photo by Andy Warhol that was produced based off of one of Lynn Goldsmith's photos. So very important to know that what happened was, to give a little facts, was back in '84, and I'm going to go quickly through the facts because there's a lot of them, but essentially Lynn Goldsmith took the picture of Prince. Vanity Fair approached her to use that photo, and they were going to have Andy Warhol doctor it up to use on the cover. She got paid $400 for it. She basically said it was a one-time thing. That being said, Andy Warhol went ahead and made 15 different pieces of artwork with it, different silk screens, different versions of it, many that got sold off, and she did not even know about those and only found out about them, I think, in 2016. But this case revolves around these being used. Sorry, I was just looking for my highlights there. Um, these revolve around Condé Nast using this photo in, I think, around 2016, somewhere and they paid the Andy Warhol Foundation $10,000 for the license to it, which Lynn Goldsmith did not get paid anything. She only got her original $400. They did not even give her any credit for it as the underlying photographer. And these highlights are a little bit. So here you can see this is the original photo that she took in 1984. Here's what Prince created out of it. And he did a series of prints. He did created 15 other works based on Goldsmith's photography, 13 silkscreen prints, and 2 pencil drawings. And he sold off all those besides the one that was licensed. She didn't know about any of them, only found out about it at a later date. And at one point reached out to, actually, and at about the same time, in 2016 after Prince's death, when the first photo when this came out, that was the $10,000 license for this photo here, and I apologize for my not scrolling, but here was the photo that was then used again that Goldsmith got paid $1,000 for after Prince's death. So they basically essentially were licensing these at the same time. Is something interesting to know. Goldsmith felt that she was being infringed. She reached out to the Andy Warhol Foundation, and in turn, they sued her for what's called declaratory judgment. And that is basically a judgment that says, declare that we are not infringing. And it can be done in a lot of different instances, but usually in trademark, copyright, or patent sense, it would be a declaration that we're not infringing, a declaration that this person, their claim is invalid, maybe their copyright is invalid, their trademark is invalid. That's usually how declaratory judgments are used. So they brought a suit in Southern District of New York. The district court essentially sided with the Andy Warhol Foundation that it's transformative. At least I'm going to go into the requirements in a little bit, but essentially they sided with her. Then she went to the next level up, which is the Second Circuit, who sided with Lynn Goldsmith on some of the issues, claiming that it's not fair use. So what is fair use? So fair use is actually written into the copyright statute. Congress put it in there. And to determine whether a particular use is fair use, the statute sets out 4 factors to be considered: the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is commercial in nature or for non-profit educational purpose; the nature of the copyrighted work itself; the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to copyright work as a whole; and the effect of the use upon the potential market for the value of the copyrighted work. Essentially, it permits courts to avoid a rigid application of copyright statute when on occasion it would stifle the very creativity which the law is designed to foster. So actually, copyright law, patent law come from the Constitution. There's a section in there about promoting science and arts, and that's where those come from. In the preamble in the section 107, which is one that covers fair use that Congress set forth, they list a few reasons for criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarships, or research. That's why a lot of times on different videos or on news channels, they're able to put up photos, videos, and show parts of it because they're showing it for news purposes. They're commenting on it. That's what gives them that right to do that. And I have a lot of highlights here because I really went through it, but what really the Supreme Court was looking at here after the Second Circuit was the first issue is whether or not the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is commercial in nature or nonprofit. We call this transformative use. Whether or not this use is transformative by the Andy Warhol Foundation. They look back at cases. There was a big case that I learned about in the early 2000s in law school about Two Live Crew. I mean, the case was from much earlier than that, but I learned about it in the early 2000s while in law school, that dealt with Two Live Crew and Roy Orbison's song Pretty Woman. And it was one of the big fair use cases because they basically took the song and just changed the lyrics. They made a parody of the lyrics to talk, instead of it being a pretty woman, to talk about women in not the nicest way. So, and the court did hold that that was a parody, it was a commentary, and it was fair use. The use that shares the purpose of a copyrighted work, by contrast, is more likely to provide the public with a substantial substitute for matter protected by the copyright owner's interest in the original work or derivatives. First factor in particular requires an analysis of the specific use of a copyrighted work that is alleged to be infringed. So that means you really need to look at the facts of how exactly this is being used, meaning it's very hard. Clients a lot of times just want, in theory, is this fair use or not? But we really have to look at the exact use and see how it's being used to determine, is this fair use? The same copying may be fair use when used for one purpose, but not for another. And they go into here, Goldsmith's copyrighted photograph has been used in multiple ways. After Goldsmith licensed the photography to Vanity Fair to serve as an artist reference, Warhol used the photograph to create Vanity Fair illustrations and others, that other series that I mentioned that he sold off. Vanity Fair then used the photographs pursuant to the license when it published Warhol's illustrations in 1984. Finally, AWF, Andy Warhol Foundation, used the photographs when it licensed an image of Warhol's Orange Prince, Condé Nast, in 2016. Only that last use, however, AWF's commercial license of Orange Prince by Condé Nast, is the one that's alleged to be infringing. So this suit is really only about that license, that $10,000 license to Condé Nast in 2016. Taken together, these two elements, that Goldsmith's photograph and AWF's 2016 license of Orange Prince, share substantially the same purpose. So as I mentioned earlier, at the same time, they both licensed their works, and that AWF's use of Goldsmith's photo was a commercial nature. Counsel against fair use, absent some other justification for copying. That is, although a use's transformativeness may outweigh the commercial character, here both elements point in the same direction. So sometimes you might have something that might be commercial, meaning you're making money off of it, but the transformation, the Two Live Crew song, they made money off it, so it was commercial, but it was such a transformation that it rose to the nature of fair use, or at least for this one element of saying that it's fair use. Here they're saying that's not the case here. It's not transformative enough, and it's commercial in nature. And they even looked at Andy Warhol's prior uses, in the Campbell soup to explain why that is fair use. He wasn't trying to sell soup there. He wasn't trying to advertise for them. He just used the logo to make a commentary on it in part of his artwork. Here they note the Court of Appeals noted correctly that whether a work is transformative cannot turn merely on the stated or perceived intent of the artist or the meaning or impression that a critic, or for the matter, a judge draws from the work. Whether the purpose and character of use weighs in favor of fair use instead is an objective inquiry. So the artist is always going to say it's transformative. And other people might say that too, but they're trying to say you really need to take an objective look at the work, not a subjective look, to determine whether or not inquiry into whether use was made, i.e., what the user does with the original work. So you really have to look at what they're doing with the work. Because Andy Warhol's Foundation commercial use of Goldsmith's photo to illustrate a magazine about prints is so similar to the photograph's typical use, a particular compelling justification is needed. So they really needed to come up with something a lot more, but here they used it for the same exact purpose. It was licensed after Prince's death to a magazine. Lynn Goldsmith also licensed hers. Lynn Goldsmith's original work, like those of other photographs, are entitled to copyright protection even against famous artists. Such protection includes the right to prepare derivative works that transform the original. To use a copyrighted work may nevertheless be fair if, among other things, the use has a purpose and character that is sufficiently distinct from the original. Here, the purpose is pretty much the exact same. In the case, however, Goldsmith's original photograph of Prince and Andy Warhol Foundation's copying use of the photograph and image license to a special edition magazine devoted to Prince share substantially the same purpose, and the use is of commercial nature. AWS has offered no other persuasive justification for its unauthorized use of the photograph. Therefore, the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use of a commercial nature or for nonprofit educational purposes, weighs in Goldsmith's favor. So this was the only issue actually in this, and they're basically giving the win to Elizabeth Lynn Goldsmith here by saying that this is just not transformative. Now, there was some arguments, and reasons how the Andy Warhol Foundation said that it was transformative, but at the end of the day, I tend to agree with this case. It's not transformative. They were used for the same exact purposes. Just because he took it and changed coloring and played with it, that all really falls into derivative work. Derivative work is things like taking a work and, if it's a book, translating it into other languages, taking a book and turning it into a movie or a movie into a book. Things like that are considered transformative work. So, the big key takeaway from this case is really just that you have to be careful with fair use. And this is what we generally tell clients, is that it's a defense. It's not a right. It's a defense to someone claiming that you're infringing. And, you really need to, for commentary, news, parody, things like that are really where you're going to have to look at to show that it's transformative enough that it would be fair use. And if you like these videos, of course, subscribe below. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and take those warnings seriously. Fair use is not fair.